All right, so we need to start this Wheel of Time discussion with a mea culpa, because last time when we were talking about Fail and if she had mentioned her name when she was introduced, I said that I would go check the Great Hunt, and I was just checking the specs on the inline for the rotary girders. I'm not allowed to say that word. Go watch Tommy Boy. It's hilarious. Obviously, it was the Dragon Reborn, and she did. I had forgotten that after. So I went and I looked it up in the chapter where they're headed downriver, and Perrin points out that the horse is named Mandarb and is laughing at her. And she says, "Oh, well, I was born Zareen Bashir." So she mentions her full name. So it's, to Scott's point about the politically inclined Aes Sedai knowing the rulers of the world. And yeah, it's completely possible that pretty much from the beginning, Moiraine knew who she was when she thinks from that chapter,
Did
from
she
her
say that?
perspective.
Did she say that in front of Moraine or just to
No,
Paranor?
no, she didn't. But I mean, come on, if she said it out loud, then surely Moiraine is going to hear because she's Moiraine.
Well, she also has the listening focus thing
She has the
too.
listening thing. Land's always around and could overhear, or a sailor could overhear, and she could get the information. It's Moiraine. She's not only Moiraine, she's a blue and she's ultra blue. So, and as we found out later, they're very keen on their spy networks.
This is
So it's quite possible that she knew very early on, practically from the beginning, who exactly Faya was. Um, all right, so we left off with them leaving the stone, and so we are on chapter 23, which is 366 of the paperback. What you drinking?
Oh, yeah. You're gonna have to try this next time because we talked about the Fireball, how it has that fake flavor. Well, I got the the Shire Fire from that Brookshire company, the Shire Distilling Company, and I have a bottle of Fireball too that I had gotten for Christmas, and I want you to compare the two side by side, and you can tell the difference between flavored and infused. And this is amazing. This is the infused. So,
All right. Well, I can't remember what I'm drinking because I'm old and forgetful. Because uh, they didn't have the usual coconut rum I get, which is the cheap stuff I get is if I want something a little better, I get Captain Morgan's because it's good. But the cheaper rum I get is Largo Bay, and it's okay. But what I got this time for a coconut rum doesn't taste nearly as artificial. Um, but I'm brain farting on what it's called. Um, so I'm drinking up the last of my coconut rum, which seems a little odd for going to the desert, but here we are.
it's hydrating,
Um, uh, for anyone who's never been to a desert, man, this I was thinking about how to kind of condense things so we could move along, and really, I think the overarching theme of these chapters, and back to the premise of why I wanted to do this in the first place, is the reason Jordan's books work is because he is a master at show don't tell. Okay, so uh you know Lan will say here in a little bit that the heat here can kill you if you're not used to it, but it's not just that Lan is saying that. Lan is saying that in response to how the wetlanders are reacting to the heat. Okay, they're just standing there, and all of a sudden they start swooning. They start to get dizzy and uncomfortable. This is from Egwene's perspective. This first chapter here, and uh, uh, I mean, talk about a wetlander. she grew up and lived right next to a big fat natural spring. Okay, I can't get much wetlander than that, and now here she is in the middle of the desert.
in the mountains. So we've got cooler temperatures, and when it does get hot, it's a dry heat.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So she she's definitely not used to this. Um, Moraine has certainly traveled a lot, but much of the continent, except in the the way this the way the main continent is shaped is a giant square. So that middle part's going to have some nasty continental summers, but for the most part, it is a more temperate place. Um, you He shows you before he tells you about. We may need to look at the pronunciation here. On Aileen, Ali, whatever the title they give land. Um, he he explains things that are going on, and when the dust up happens, uh here in a few pages after they show up, and he leans down and he whispers to them about how not I said I wise ones are supposed to be free and safe to travel anywhere at any time during the waste, and no one will harm them. So the fact that they could have come to harm is a big effing deal. um and Lan says, I don't know a lot about them, but I fought them before we met. And you never thought to ask. And Marion gets annoyed, and well, I shall think to remedy that. Um, but before he explains, he shows that Lan has had contact with him. They know him, specifically as someone noteworthy. And then in the at the end of the chapter, when they sit down in the tents, and Moraine asks, "Why do you call him that?" And then they explain they know of him. He is known to the Aiel. Um, you see a lot of the culture of the Aiel here. That he shows you some things at the beginning of the chapter when the different people, Hern and Couladin and the wise ones, they all come out and they have these interactions, and we only get a little bit of explanation of what's going on here from Lan, and then the wise ones explain later. So first he shows you, and then he kind of fills in some of the gaps. But because this is from Egwene's perspective, one, the gaps aren't always filled because Egwene doesn't get it, but two, he he doesn't try and pound out all the details. And I don't know how much of it is just because it would be boring if he did, and how much of it was on purpose. Because if you think about it, culture doesn't make a lot of objective, rational sense. Because there are so many variables over so much time, and certain things stay, certain things go. And so it was like when I was living in Germany trying to explain how to play baseball to someone who really didn't get it, and had no cultural foundation of baseball. I I grew up swinging a bat at a ball when I was literally in diapers. Okay, or seeing it on TV because your grandpa's watching it. You have a basis of understanding, even if you've never played the game. This is someone who's never seen a bat and a ball. You go to any, you go into any store in America just about, and maybe not as much anymore, but there's baseball paraphernalia being sold. You have a basis of understanding. You come from the outside and look in, and that basis of understanding makes absolutely no sense
Unless you understand the underlying biology of some things. Culture does make sense to some degree. Let's look at a good example is spicy food. Spicy food, where do you see spicy food the most?
Strangely, in hotter climates.
In hotter climates, right?
Which on the surface seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. But why do we see spicy food in hotter climates? Well, because capsaicin kills bacteria. And in warmer climates, bacteria breeds faster. So when you're trying to preserve food or eat food that you have that is not exactly fresh, over time, they learned to add the spices to the food because more people survive when they eat it. And so that's an element of culture over time that if you're the outside looking in, you're like, oh God, that's hot, that's spicy. But it actually makes perfect sense when you know the underlying mechanisms behind it. So most cultural things actually have an underlying mechanism. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, there are some things where it's like, no, you're a little antiquated there. But
A great example of the convoluted, complicated mess of culture is the English language. Okay, because if you take even a cursory examination of the history of the British Isles, and you have the indigenous people, and I do that in quotes because who the hell knows where they came from, but the peoples that were there when the Romans showed up, and then you have the Romans, and then you have influence from Gaul, ancient France, when the Romans came in there and annexed it as part of the empire. Then you have the same happening from the various Germanic and Scandinavian tribes as they were pushed out. Then you have full-fledged invasions from those people. And then the Normans come along and mess everything up by adding in more modern French. So you've got the Dane Law, as it was called, because the Danish were one of the main uh, invasions when the Vikings practically took over The Last Kingdom. Go watch The Last Kingdom. It's a great show. I need to get back to it at some point, and I keep forgetting to. But it talks about this history.
Yeah, finish your thought and then bring that up again because I have something that Wheel of Time relevant with The Last Kingdom.
So one of the reasons the English language is so complicated if you start to get into the mechanics of it, and why it's so difficult for even other Western European peoples to learn, is because you've got that base, Pict, Celtic, whatever. Then you've got the Saxon, then you've got the Angles, then you've got the various Scandinavians, and then you have the Latin from first the Romans and then the church. And then you have the Normans coming in and making a mess by making, a lot of people don't realize, French was the court language of the aristocracy for centuries in England. So then you've got that adding to the stew. And that's why you have a lot of weirdness and a lot of exceptions in the English language and in English grammar. And if you're trying to learn the language, you see all these memes about I before E, except after C, except for. That's where those exceptions come from in the grammar, is because you have these holdovers from all of these different sources. And if you don't have at least a basic understanding of the history of the British Isles, the English language makes absolutely no sense. And it looks like, the people who came up with it just reached into a bag and started pulling things out at random.
Yeah, we can go into a long talk about language and accents. Accents actually very much come from the exceptions to the rules. So like, here's a good example. If I said traded, ED, I added ED to the end, traded, but I say aged, you pronounce the ED differently, right? So traded and aged, you pronounce the ED differently. So now when I talk in another language, if there's a similar situation, I will still have those two things in mind. And that's where actually accents come from, is the differences within the same pronunciation of something to a large degree. But what I wanted to get at from specifically to Wheel of Time discussion was you brought up Last Kingdom. I had some hopes going into the casting of Wheel of Time because the casting director was the same person that did Last Kingdom. And Last Kingdom was cast exquisitely. I mean, I can't think of a single character that, maybe one or two characters that was not what I thought fit the part. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, at least we're going to have good good people in there, and it didn't happen. And this is why I always go back to is it the person doing the job, or is it the pressure on the person doing the job? Because she obviously did a great job with Last Kingdom. Why couldn't she do a great job with kind of a similar genre of entertainment? And I think it was the pressure, not the person. Macy Gray.
Speaking of, so one of the reasons I snarkily brought up the misogyny of Robert Jordan is because this opening chapter is.
Well, you didn't bring it up in this recording. You brought it up at the end of the last
Yeah.
recording.
But this chapter, and I like that we switch away from Rand's point of view again. So we started off with Rand's storyline as the three storylines separate. We start off with his storyline with Moraine's point of view. So something major is about to happen, and we know it's about to happen because we saw the effects with the others, but Jordan holds back from revealing that by making it someone else's point of view, so we don't know until it happens. Okay. And we have the same thing again here. Is Rand is about to go to Rhuidean, and we don't know that, and we don't know why. Where did this idea come from? How did Rand get it in his head? One, and two, how does he know how to ask? Because they say it's of the old form, but it's acceptable. How does he even know how to ask? Well, we don't know that. Jordan keeps the mystery. He prevents himself from even being able to tell us. He has to show us because we're seeing through Egwene's eyes. But another thing he does so well that annoys the young woke idiots is the gender roles, the differences in men and women, because we're seeing it through someone else's eyes. He's telling us something interesting here without being blatant about it and without making a judgment, because this is Egwene's point of view. You know, right at the beginning here, where is it?
The beginning of the chapter when basically
so
he says, well, we got there.
Page 367, down near the bottom. So, hey, you know, we got there, and that is what matters, Lance said, nodding. It worked. Right. So Egwene made it vex tisk min. One almost killed himself, then tried to make a joke of it, and another told him he had done the right thing. Did they never grow up? This really stands out to me, because I was kind of already in this frame of mind, and in this reread, we've brought up the woke nonsense, to your point, because of the casting and the writing, the way the Prime series was done. He did acknowledge it. Rand did point out, crap, I almost killed myself. Okay. What he's saying that Egwene can't see because we think differently is, but it was worth the risk, and I got it done. Mm-hmm. And Alan is, in his own way, congratulating him, saying, good, you got the job done. That's what matters.
I can't say this is a male or female way of thinking, but it is the way I think. And if it happens to go along those gender lines, then we'll go that way. But it's, in his mind, he's saying, if I don't live, we all die. But if I don't win, we all die. Mm-hmm. And so the second part is as important as the first, because we can be risk averse all we want, but if you don't do anything, nothing gets done.
How many dangerous things has Egwene done up to this point? We talked about this kind of in the spoiler section, where we were talking about some different things, and we went back and we talked about the Dragon Reborn, and the way the girls knowingly walk into not just a trap, but a very freaking dangerous trap with, at the least, 13 Black Ajah. But they weigh the risks, and they look at the rewards, and they say it has to be done. Men and women, we all make value judgments and trade-offs. men and women just have different ways of making those evaluations. To
Well,
her, it was obvious that, go back and reread that lead up to them leaving Tarvalon and going down uh to Tyr, and it's obvious that, well, we got to go, and it's not should we go, it's okay, well, how do we make this plan and how do we give ourselves the best chance of success?
well, some of it's not even a gender thing. Some of it's just a self bias. You know, how many times do you see a video that says, "Don't try this at home"? But obviously they did it. You know, it's a I'm making my own personal choice, and I don't want me to be the reason you did this. And so we kind of have that own bias within us because, say we're thinking of the safety of our child, right? So I'm going to take these risks to live, for my child to live, for my spouse to live, for my family to live. But because I'm doing that, that shows me the same level of care that I don't want them to take that same risk. And so we kind of, it's an internal bias we have. Mm-hmm. And it's for that reason, but it bleeds over into everything. And so Egwene can 100% justify her own actions in her own risky behavior. But as soon as someone else does it, especially someone she cares about, which is Rand, even though it's not romantically anymore, she still cares about him. You basically flip the switch to protective mode. It's unconscious, but it leads to those kind of thoughts. I don't think it's a male-female thing. I think it's a me-you.
Well, there is an element of gender differences here, because another analogy I thought of was one of my favorite shows when I used to watch TV, or at least early on, was The Deadliest Catch, because it's knucking futs. Mm-hmm. That's a very male thing. But statistically speaking, the overwhelmingly the top deadliest jobs in the world are almost exclusively male. Well, a lot of people will look at the people, you're crab fishing in 30-degree weather or lower. You just hit a wave that made your boat disappear, and you do this every day. A lot of people would look at that and say, that's stupid and crazy. Almost every woman would look at that and say, that's stupid and crazy.
Well, and that is a gender difference where you go into men are more likely to risk for production, risk for resource production. Whereas females, their risk is equal but different. It's the mama bear analogy, right? Mama bear will fight anything.
Oh yeah, I love watching. I've said before, I love watching nature documentaries, and I love bears, and it's hilarious to me to watch a female bear that, because she has a cub or two or three, she's outweighed by like 300 pounds by this male bear, but he even gets a little close and she immediately gets aggressive, and she wins because she's the aggressor. It's as great an analogy to me as we often use the male lion analogy for, lazy sex crazed men. The mama bear analogy is, I think, a great analogy for women and that maternal instinct and what it can do. Mm-hmm. And in the books, I think we first saw this in The Great Hunt, is when this came up, and it's used pretty much till the very end of the series. The Shienaran, or the Borderlander, saying, duty is heavier than a mountain, death is lighter than a feather. And
which going forward, we should start looking for patterns. The male aggressive behavior versus the female, is it more paternal or maternal? Because we look at the girls in Tenchico, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, it's protective of Rand. Because there's something there that could hurt him.
Especially when they figure out what it is. Mm-hmm. When they then their resolve becomes even more focused.
Whereas with Matt, well, Perrin is duty. Perrin is, I mean, at this point, he really wasn't protecting his family anymore because they're dead.
They're gone. Yeah, they're all gone.
They're all gone. So he's trying to do what's right at this point. Matt's his own guy. We
can't get too much into Matt yet because where his masculinity shows up is down the road, and it is there, but it's in the next book.
Well, it's in fits and spurts because he's so random.
Yes,
because he's already shown it with his protecting the girl in the hayloft, and
then his mad dash down to Tyr to protect the girls down there when he finds out they're in danger. So we do see it, and we know what his mentality is. We just haven't seen it yet in the grand scheme of the big story of the Wheel of Time, of the Dragon Reborn and Ran, because he is the most chaotic and reflexively opposed to the idea of duty, even though he still does it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's go forward from that frame of thought with the females versus the males.
Egwene is a good one here, and I think to me,
hey, our audience hates Egwene. Remember?
I know our audience of one, Scott. Stop being so mean to her. To me, this is where her story really begins and really starts to get good. Is the Shadow Rising, because we get a lot of points of view of her. Within Rand's story arc, if we're not, we get a little bit of Matt, but then if it's not Rand, it's Egwene. We're seeing the Aiel through her, because what Rand sees kind of with the Aiel as a whole and in the big picture, we really get the wise ones all from Egwene's perspective, because she's the one who's there. She's learning from them. And we see that here at the end of the chapter, where she's ready to learn. She wants to start, and she wants to start now. So she's very driven, which is a positive, but she's still flawed because she's very naive and yet arrogant. And the wise ones are trying to set her down and put her in her place. But there's a balance there, a push and a pull there, because Egwene, to her credit, is more powerful and more capable than what they're used to dealing with when it comes to apprentices. But she's not nearly what she thinks she is.
Mm-hmm. Well, you get a sense of that too. What she should have seen, but in her youth she didn't, is when the wise ones channeled for the first time, she was amazed that they could. Whereas if she was developed enough, she would have known they could before they did.
Yeah, her reaction compared to Moraine's. Moraine just kind of arches an eyebrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Avienda is pulled out, she realizes they're sending her to Rhuidean to become a wise one, and she realizes, oh, that's why I felt such a kinship to her, because she has the spark.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Moraine, way back in the Eye of the World, when she pulls Egwene aside and explains to her that you have the spark and I need to guide you through your first touching of the source. I mean, again, she knew it. She knew what she felt. Egwene is still trying to learn, and she says she understands the dangers. I mean, she's seen some of them, and then Varen showed her the big honking scar that couldn't be healed. So she's seen some of it, but there's a difference between intellectually knowing and fully understanding, which comes from experience. By the way, Rhuidean. I could have swore I looked that up.
Emphasis on the Rye. Rhuidean. Okay. Every time you said that, I was like, I need to look that up, and it just
I
remember
could have
to.
swore I looked that up not that long ago to make sure I was saying it right. Apparently, I still didn't say it right. Okay, Rhuidean.
Rhuidean. Who knows with Jordan? He made
Yeah.
things up, I think.
Well, I also need an English degree to, as I just ranted about the gobbledygook that is the English language. I mean, even looking up how to pronounce a word, the phonetic spelling only helps you if you understand the okay, you know, right above Rhuidean, the Rindra, okay, Rehn, okay, but you know the the innkeeper in Tanchico is all right, but you have to have some sort of understanding to know how to pronounce that and then how to emphasize that. It's
Mhm.
okay. So Rhui. All right. Well, what does that mean, and how is that different than Rhui? I don't know. Leave me alone.
uh, I enjoy listening to John McWhorter, but I like listening to his linguistic stuff, which is his
Mm,
specialty. And he
yeah.
talks about Creole languages and stuff. And it's an insight into what makes language. It's not just the words we speak. And it, I think he would describe what Robert Jordan did as a Creole language. With a Creole language is not what we think of when we think of like kind of Louisiana area type stuff. But it's a hybrid language between people that all come together from different places.
Mhm.
And so it tends to be more basic and it tends to have weird pronunciations of the same things because it's all these people that came together and kind of just basically made a consensus on how we're going to talk.
Yeah, it's not Spanglish, which is just English and Spanish in South Texas,
Yeah.
right? Which is just two things. And no, we've got several different things that have to be morphed together. All right, so last thought on Egwene here at the end of where we see a positive character trait, but Jordan is still showing us that she's got a long way to go. At the very end of the chapter, where she's, you know, where the wise ones are explaining to her that you're going to have to forget everything you know because you might be an Aes Sedai as far as they're concerned, but you're an apprentice again. And she's thinking, ah, ha, ha, I already am. That's what I just was. And, the visits to the mistress of the novices to get paddled and, scrubbing pots until your back breaks and your fingers, are prunes. The I think Jordan is making a point about both of them here that the wise ones are so convinced that they're going to break her because she's just a wetlander. And she's so convinced that they can't do anything worse to her than than has already been done to her. And we're going to see as her apprenticeship kind of unfolds that they're both right and they're both wrong. That the reason you go through a hell week, the reason you go through 2-a-days, the reason you go through a boot camp is because you're about to do something very, very difficult. And you can't even start that until you are shown, not told, but shown that you can do more than you think you can. Which is what those things are all about, whether it's a military or a sports analogy. You have to prove to yourself that you can push farther and endure more than you think you can. That you have to go to your breaking point and realize, oh wait, that's not my breaking point. I can push through this. And so Egwene is able to endure the rigors of what the wise ones are going to put her through because she's already had an element of that. But it's not going to be the cakewalk she kind of thinks it is. It's still going to be really damn hard, but she's going to be able to push her way through it, which is where the wise ones they think that their ways are the only ways, every bit as much as the Aes Sedai think their ways are the only ways, rather than realizing, where I think Egwene shines down the road is realizing that we all have things to add that are beneficial, because she is in the very unique position of having gone through both of them. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I almost went into I almost went into spoiler territory there.
Okay, let's get into the city then.
All right. So,
well, no, wait, I guess we got to lead up to the city because Rand does his thing, and
then he says, "Matt's with me." I love the kind of the arrogance and self-confidence of, you said I could go, and I say he can go with me, so he's going with me. Okay, this ain't your place, son, but I guess you're the dragon now, huh? But as much of kind of a dick move as it is, I mean, he is supposed to be the leader here. He is the one that is prophesied and fated to save the world. So on some level, he has to kind of make his own choices.
well, we get introduced to somebody important too. Rhuidean, who tries to kill Mat.
Good luck with that. Get into that more later. I like that we get, again, from Egwene's point of view. So we're on the outside looking in as Mat and Rand banter with each other and then just kind of disappear. And that when we pick back up here, we're still not from Rand's point of view. At the beginning of chapter 4, we're from Mat's point of view. Which is just on the surface level fun, because Mat is kind of a fun comic relief character. But also because Rand is doing some big things here. And from Mat's point of view, it's kind of crazy. And we do have to worry about, we really start to get more of an inclination of, oh, we've talked about the madness, but now are we seeing the madness? When Rand is just standing there kind of chuckling after pulling out the water from the fountains. And he's just kind of standing there laughing, and Mat has to say, dude, you gonna get a drink, or you just gonna stand there and die of thirst? Right? So not only is Jordan able to maintain more mystery here, because we don't know explicitly why Rand is doing what he's doing and how he's doing what he's doing, but now we add another wrinkle to his character and to the way his friends and close confidants see him and their character of, is Rand going crazy already? Because that sure looks crazy.
Well, and I would like to point out that in the course of our reading here in the timeline we're in, Mat's the first one to see Aviendha naked.
Oh yeah, because he saw some lunatic naked redhead lady running into the fog, and Rand didn't see it, but Mat got himself an eyeful. Man, you got me sidetracked. That's another good point from the previous chapter, which is Egwene being so impressed with Aviendha when she strips naked. One, that she's not showing any embarrassment, and Egwene would be culturally, that's a different thing. We actually do see later where Aviendha is really embarrassed when she's naked, but because it's out of context, right? So she's impressed by that, but then she's really impressed by Aviendha physically. She's standing there on scorching desert rocks, not even wiggling a toe. And but Egwene fails to recognize where Avienda is so weak, which is mentally and emotionally. And Amos talks about that, of how long Avienda has run with the spears when she should have begun her Wise One apprenticeship. And that's where Egwene has things that we'll see their friendship, where Avienda helps Egwene strengthen herself physically and a little bit mentally, but Egwene has to try and influence Avienda in this uh, non-physical part of her growth, because she can strip naked and run over blistering hot desert rocks for miles. Well, we don't get it exactly, but up the mountain, the city is miles down in the flats, and they're up on a slope. So she's running a long damn way in 110-degree heat over rocks.
Well, and
That's
this is where
harsh.
Jordan shows his lack of understanding of physiology, because one thing he repeatedly says about the Aiel is the difference between what's undercover versus what's not when it comes to their skin tone.
Uh-huh.
And she would be burnt to a crisp by
Yeah.
then, because the parts that are usually covered by the cotton sore would be not adapted to the sunshine.
Yeah.
And
He talks a lot about sun darkened, and they wear appropriate desert clothing. Now you look at bush people in Africa, they don't wear as much, and they rarely wear foot coverings. So it makes sense that they can do these things.
mhm.
And so he's kind of combining cultures there, of the kind of Bedouin culture with the bush people culture, and it just doesn't work.
Nice little moment that I think we can't skip over is when Matt's talking about why they're going.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, maybe that's the answer they always give everybody.
Yeah.
Those snake people, I mean, go to Rhuidean. And then Rand's just like, they never mentioned that to me, Matt. Oh shit.
Yeah. Oh, burn me. And he doesn't like that he gave away information, even though this is, one of his best friends, supposedly.
Well, he doesn't like that he gave away information, but he also doesn't like the fact that that's not why they're there.
It's not why, yeah. Well, it's not why Rand is there.
Yeah.
So then he has to think, why am I here? And then, a few pages later, oh crap, we get why he's here, because there's another stupid door. So do you have thoughts on the door? I mean, I don't know how much we could talk about that, about how his second foray into the doorway, without getting do you remember getting this the first time you read it, about the differences between the two doorways?
Probably not, because I don't know what you're alluding to.
In that Matt is pissed off, and he says, all right, where is it? I'm jumping to the end here. 402. So they say, speak, one of the women said in that growling voice. By the ancient treaty, here is agreement made. What is your need? Speak. And he thinks he's had a long time to think. So he very specifically, very directly asks 3 simple questions, and they don't say anything, and he gets pissed off. Do you remember getting the difference between the questions and speak your need the first time you read through?
Well, I did, like, shortly after, like,
when we come back around to Matt and he has the things.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of where I was. And then I think the second time I read through, and I noticed these, what is your need? And it's, oh, duh. And there's a lot of that with Jordan, why it's got such reread value is because they're not there to answer questions, dummy. But Matt being Matt, in much the same way that we saw when he went through the first doorway the first time, and he instinctively just kind of winged it and got it right. And this one, he got it mostly right, except for the part about, not talking about price and then getting hung. All right. Do you have any more thoughts on that before we get into the real meat here? And this is where it gets
yeah, we got to come
boy.
back to this for the spoilers, I guess, because there's so much in that little moment. I mean, we're talking about a page tops of writing that foreshadows 14 or 10 more books. So,
well, this next chapter, The Road to the Spear, and the one after that, The Dedicated. So these two chapters, I mean, this is centuries of history here. Mm-hmm. This is big. But
we got to fly through it.
Just as an overview, I really like the way Jordan did this, of starting at the end and going backwards. And again, the point of view technique is that there's still an element of mystery, because every time he comes out of those flashbacks, so the flashbacks are mysterious in and of themselves, because when Rand enters those, he kind of loses himself. And so from the point of view of whoever, is the main character for that flashback, they don't need to explain things because everything is what it is as far as they're concerned. Mm-hmm. And then when we get out of it, we don't get a narrator giving us exposition, because our narrator is Rand, and he's unreliable because he knows as much as we do about this.
Well, this is where we can get back to our central theme of the world of dreams. To me, this is a manifestation of that, because when you have a dream, think of the most vivid dream you've had recently, right? You're in it, and you are that whatever you are in that dream. And it is only after waking that you put together that you weren't there actually.
Yeah, and if it's an especially vivid dream, then there's that moment right after you wake where you're confused. And
every once in a while, when you have what's called a lucid dream, you have that moment where you're like, wait, this isn't right. But at the same time, it's only after waking, and you only remember the last dream you had. We have thousands of dreams a night, but you only remember the last one you had because it's what is right there when you come into the waking world. And that's what we're getting with this, is he's in a dream. He is this person. And then he has a flash and he's aware. And then he goes to the next one. Mm-hmm. And it's so I 100% believe that as we keep going forward in these books, this is connected to the world of dreams.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing to keep an eye on, because I just finished the series not that long ago, and it was after you made the point of the first time you made the point about how critical the world of dreams is to the narrative as a whole. And I was right near the end, and as I finished it up, I said, holy crap, I'm gonna have to try and remember that, because you may have been more right than you even knew when you were talking about that. But
okay, well, so this is a Turing Grell, right? So yep. One of my major points that I think I'm trying to progress through this reread as we go through, and it's an evolving thought on my end as well, is that the power and the world of dreams are directly connected. And so because it's a power-made instrument, being a Turing Grell.
Well, we got a peek of that when Varen was explaining the world of dreams to Egwene, because I may have to go look this up, but I believe, as she put it, there are 3 constants in all the alternative universes: the Dark One, the Power, the world of dreams.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the creator.
Oh, the creator. Okay, yeah. So the power is a constant through the universe, just as the world of dreams is a constant through the universe that connects all of these different worlds. And so
now there are some things to reconcile still, because Perrin can enter the world of dreams and he has nothing to do with the power. So there are some things to reconcile along the way, but it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Does the power leak out from the world of dreams? Is it a product of the creator? Is it a product of the dark one? Maybe that's the true power. Maybe that's this or that. So all of these things we have to reconcile, but there is some connectivity through it all.
So finishing up my thought about the style here is, even though Jordan leaves a lot of mystery because of how he reveals these flashbacks and reveals the history of the Aiel, we, the reader, still know from the very beginning what's going on. If he had started from the very beginning, from where it ends with the, drilling into the bore, and it's like, what the heck was that? It would have at the same time, I think, been more confusing and also been more revealing. So he's able to keep us on this train from the beginning, because we were just looking at Rhuidean. We were just on the mountain with the Aiel. So we know from the beginning the path we're on. But then it starts to get a little more confusing and a little more mysterious as we go backwards and start to think, wait a minute, how is this connected with that? How is this second scene, this third scene connected with the end there? So he shows us what he's doing, the story he's telling, with that very first flashback of all the Aiel chiefs standing before the city as it's still under construction, talking to these ancient Aes Sedai, and getting the prophecy, a part of the prophecy of Rhuidean. But then we get more mystery, because then we go into the breaking, and it's like, wait a minute, but how did that connect to that? Right? So each time he's giving you a little kernel, and it's not until the end that you're really able to put the whole picture together. But I don't feel like you're ever lost, because he started at the end and you knew how all these flashbacks were connected to Rand and Rhuidean and everything that's going on.
Well, think of what this is for, though. This is for the selection, or at least what they use it for, is a selection of a clan chief, right? And it's kind of the difference between wisdom and intelligence. If you started from the beginning and went forward, you would get an educational process, and you would get I already used the word education of it. If you started from the end and worked back, you would get a better view of the process. So you would develop the wisdom to not let something happen again, or to be able to handle something. So we get, with the way they go in there, most of them die, as we see with the other guy that's in there. He basically rips his eyes out, right? And you would get a different effect with the leader you're trying to produce. Now, whether that was the purpose to begin with, because this was around before they started sending clan chiefs there, but at the same time, we have this element of fate that is the Wheel of Time.
Well, I don't know that we're going to get to it today, but that is something Rand thinks of when he gets out of here, is that, well, even before he gets out and is contemplating what he saw, after this first vision, after this first flashback, he has the thought that Aes Sedai was looking at him, not looking at, is it Janduin that is the first person that he sees through his eyes? Let me get da, 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 da. No, that's later. Mandine, or however the hell you pronounce that. I'm all paranoid now. So he has the feeling after this first flashback that when that Aes Sedai looks after he speaks, that she's not looking at him, the Aiel chief speaker. She's actually looking through his eyes and somehow knows that Rand is riding along behind.
Mm.
And so he thinks later, not going into the specifics, but Rand actually has this thought, which is an interesting thought that Jordan says explicitly and puts in that kernel in the reader's mind of, was all of this done just to get to Rand? Because that's something I hadn't quite considered explicitly, is that the whole point of going into Rhuidean is to choose the chief. Rand is the product of a chief. He is the son of a chief. Mm-hmm. So this winnowing process was to get to Rand.
Well, and it's a central theme of all of it. And I picked this up even the first time I read it, was that it was, because we see all the changes that happen after. None of this stuff can really happen the same way it did after all of this. So, but back to the thought I had is, it's the difference between education and wisdom. And wisdom is the product of looking back. That's why we can't have wisdom without age, without experience, right? And this whole process in the pillars is starting from where they're at and working back. So when you think of the difference between, there's always the quote of, intelligence is knowing tomato is a fruit, but not wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad, right? Well, we don't know the second one except through experience, because it tastes bad, right? And in the rings, they start from where they're at and they say, okay, so what led to that? And then what led to that? And then what led to that last thing I just learned? And then what led to that? And so now we can figure out how to go forward from there, because we looked at the past.
Yeah.
And that's where wisdom comes in, because it's a culmination of knowledge of the past. And usually that happens through experience. And so in the clan chiefs perspective is, they get the experience that not everybody else can have.
So it's interesting that you bring that, because my last big picture thought, and then if there are any specifics about these flashbacks you want to talk about, but my last kind of big picture thought of these two chapters is something that has kind of bothered me, but I've also kind of wrestled with, because I can also see it, is that part of me is bothered by the fact that every time we go back, or as I love the way the prose Jordan uses is forward and then back. Rand steps forward deeper into the crystals and he moves backwards, going. But that backward step is either the father or grandfather of the person whose eyes he was just looking through. And that person seems to have no idea of what has come before. Now, again, you kind of have to put this together after you've read the whole thing, because you're moving backwards, but each one is kind of a new world. Now, granted, part of that is because the breaking is happening. And so every day could quite literally be a new world, because you're taking millions of years of geological time and cramming it together by the way that the men are physically destroying the world. But then because of that physical disruption, you also have thousands of years of cultural time smashed together, because what usually takes, centuries, if not millennia, due to migration and movement and reaction to catastrophe is now happening constantly. But it always seemed odd to me that the son or the grandson never really seemed to know where he had come from. Does that make sense? Am I
Yeah,
overthinking that?
no, I think it makes sense if you think of things in a first world sense. But in the way it's written, it makes sense in a way if you think of things in a third world sense. So I knew my grandfather and we had a great relationship because he lived to 98 years old and was viable for many years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But in this context, that wouldn't have happened. Right. So 2 or 3 generations removed, it is a completely different world, unless you have written texts in universities and public schools and all these things we have now. So it's you would have to have access to that person, and in every one of these situations, that person's already gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's the back and forth in my own mind, is because the intellectual, the historical study, and I know how much can be lost, forgotten, misremembered just over a few generations. So it makes perfect sense to me that from the first thing we see there, uh, with the prophecy of Rhuidean, and then all the way to the drilling of the bore, I I, I think in the appendices, and then you can kind of patch together through some things that are said. But basically, we the reader know that the breaking was about 300 years long. That's a long time full of catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So you can understand how end point and beginning point don't know anything about each other, but it's still interesting to me, if a bit odd. And, you know, perhaps this was on purpose as uh, as kind of a commentary and a warning from Jordan, that here you have grandfather to grandson, or even father to son, not knowing what came before, because, and he's kind of hinted at this in talking about the Aiel, that there are certain things we don't talk about. Okay, well, that has ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
That has serious ramifications and impact, because now your next generation, or the generation after that, is acting on completely incomplete data. And what mistakes are they going to make because they didn't know what happened the previous generation? And then that's going to compound itself, because every subsequent generation is then going to have the mistakes, the incomplete data between that, but then there's carryover of that generation's mistakes, right? So that's how you end up at a point where uh um where is it, where the Jinn starts talking, and he's kind of contemptuous of
Well, while you're looking that up,
yeah,
that's another point too in the incongruence, because there is a moment of separation where they use weapons and they're not supposed to, and they're cut off
yes.
from the previous generation.
But there's a point here in this first flashback where the Jinn, the true Aiel, are kind of contemptuous and pointing out how much you don't know. You don't even know what you don't know. Why don't you carry a sword? And the Aiel warriors, they're, how do you not know that, Jin? It's forbidden. It's not the way. But to the Jin's point, why? Why isn't it the way? Why is it forbidden? You don't know. You've forgotten. And that matters. But they've forgotten because you wouldn't have anything to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, when we see the beginnings of the Tuatha On, the traveling people, the Tinkers, and again, they don't know because you won't have anything to do with each other. You won't tell them. You won't discuss.
And
You
this is
won't
another,
interact.
I don't think this is a spoiler because we've talked about similar things in spoilers, but I don't think this is where we're at. This is a failing of Jordan. Is he never gave us a Tuatha On perspective to figure out when they forgot that they were Aiel. Because
well, you can infer based on how much information is lost between generations of the Aiel. You can infer that similar things are going to happen among the other peoples.
Yeah, but you have to have a moment of time where we were a thing and we were the true thing, which we got in the flashbacks here. We were the true thing. Well, where did they lose sight of when they were the true thing? And I would have liked to know that, because all of a sudden they were seeking a song, and the ones that were the true thing would have known the song. So where did that disconnect happen?
By the time the Tinker split off, the song had already been forgotten by the Aiel.
But the Gen Aiel.
No, they wouldn't have known. That's why the Tinkers left.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people had forgotten the song, because all they cared about, because there was a point to that scene where the Tinker split off, is our grandfathers talked about a time when a song could spread greenery and life. Okay. The Aiel, have forgotten what that song was, even though that was a major component we see in the very last flashback. That was a major component to our life. But now all we care about, all our focus is the charge of the Aiel to keep these things safe. So they'd already forgotten the song. The Jinn don't know the song. All they know is they have to keep moving and they have to keep all these things safe for the Aes Sedai until they come back for them.
So now we might have to go off into spoilers.
All right, well, let's pause here because that's about all I have on these two chapters.
No, we got through Rhuidean. That was further than I thought we could get.
Yeah, well, because unless you had anything, I didn't want to talk about the specifics of it. I think those those two chapters and all of those great flashback scenes stand on their own 2 feet, and they're great action and incidences that happen. But to me, the bigger picture is more interesting and more important.
Okay, so we'll get to the bigger picture here in about 10 seconds. All right, we're getting to spoilers.
Well, but before we get to that, if there's anyone still following along, that this is your first read, if there are any specifics, or if you read through those 2 chapters and said, what? I don't get it. Make a comment and we'll address it. I think, but it's hard for me to remember 20 years ago reading these for the first time. But I feel like when I first read it all kind of clicked at the end there when Rand comes out, after having seen the last vision. It all kind of clicked together. But if there were some things that you read that made you go, I don't get it, whether if it's a first read, say so in a comment so that we don't spoil anything, or if it's a reread, say I've never gotten, I still don't get this part, and we can, think about it, address it. But I feel like the specific actions all kind of speak for themselves, even though our narrator is unreliable, because we're seeing through Rand's eyes, and he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't get any of this.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's get into the spoilery section. And did you have thoughts that you wanted to address there?
Yeah, the first one, I guess, is the meta one for me, because I still was upset that we didn't conclude the song storyline, because for those that watch both parts of this, we talk a lot about entropy versus order, chaos versus order. And when it comes to the world, the universe, and everything, there's a balance between the two. We can't have one without the other. And we mentioned before vermin being the breakdown of material, right? So that's why we kind of reflexively dislike vermin. We don't like maggots. We don't like rats. We don't like all of these things that break things down. But on the flip side, there is something that brings back order from that. And that's plants. Plants bring back order. And the song was all about growing plants. Loyal does it when he grows a tree, when he tree sings. And that was the bridge, the gap that they never bridged, that you're supposed to get is the tree singing talent was the same as what in the visions the Aiel and the Ogier did to bring forward the crops. So bringing forth order from nothing is what plants do. They take micronutrients and stuff from the ground that's already been broken down, and then take solar energy, basically is the easiest way to say it, and break it down into chemical bonds and create very specific orderly structures from it. And then we eat it and we break it down and we make energy for our bodies and make parts and things for our bodies. And then we die, it breaks down. And then plants regrow it back up. And it was the thing missing from the end is we got the chaos and we got the battle, but we never got the regaining of order.
I disagree.
Okay.
And here's why. And this is something Jordan says both through his writings and he had said in interviews and in Q&As at book signings and whatnot, is that things change. So this is from the opening of a wind blew from the blobbity blah in every book, another called the third age by some. So this is the third age, and we see writings from the fourth age along with the prophecies in the prologues and whatnot. And so the next age, the fourth age, is going to be a new age. It's not the second age come again. It's a new age. So it's going to be different. It's not going to be the struggle and the trials that was the third age. It's going to be a new age of legends, as some people call it in the world, but it's not going to be the same. The wonders of the Age of Legends came about from the One Power. We don't know how because he doesn't go into it, but you have to assume that there is a power component to the song. And it's not an accident that so many of the Aiel have the power, are born with the spark, and leave the Dashain to become the Aiel.
We can debate that from several angles because we have Baron's own thoughts that they're weeding the power out of the West, whereas in the Aiel, they celebrate wise ones, and the only thing they do is send the men off. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the wise ones marry and breed, whereas Aes Sedai do not.
They're like modern day priests.
Mm-hmm. So it's
so
where in the fourth age, where does the order come from? Technology. That's the question.
So we've kind of referenced before that the second age is kind of a Marvel Ragnarok, that they're so advanced with their use of the power, they become almost science fiction. Well, the fourth age, we already have hints by Lord of Chaos when Rand starts his school. So we already have hints halfway through the series that the next stage is going to be a steampunk age. The One Power is still there, But now here's technology. And by the end of the series, we actually see steam driven wagon trains. We see cannons. Mm-hmm. So the order, and he references, now the focus is on the military because that's the driver of the story. But he references that there are those in the schools who are using these technological advances to apply them to agriculture, to farming. So instead of a song to improve farming, we now have tractors.
Yeah, well, except
tractors.
Except my rebuttal to the fourth age being a little less power is, in the last several books, we see a resurgence of the power. Whereas it was dwindling with the Aes Sedai reign. When we get the kin back in and we get the Aiel back into the fold, we're seeing a resurgence in the Black Tower as well, a resurgence in the proliferation of the power. So we're getting that right going into the end.
But consider where the knowledge and theory of the power comes from. In the Second Age, we are told that war is unknown. Who is it? Somebody, when they're talking to Rand and they're talking to him as Lews Therin, was it Bilal or was it Ishamael who talks about, do you remember when we just rediscovered, basically Lews Therin and one of the Forsaken rediscovered sword fighting, but it was a sport.
Bilal.
It was fencing. It was sport. And then they realized later that, oh, we can use this for martial combat, because they had to. Because after the bore was drilled, then very slowly, eventually, monsters started to show up. People started to change. And there's this long buildup until you actually get to the War of Power. So all of these marvels of the One Power and its use in the Age of Legends were created in a time of peace, pure utopian peace. Everything that's going to happen in the Fourth Age with regards to the power is in a foundation of struggle and war. It's going to be a different kind of power. The power itself is the same, but its usage, its users are going to be different. And the technological advances that come about are going to come about separately, because there's no longer that commingling of craftsmen and One Power users, because the Aes Sedai, the One Power users, for 3,000 years have segregated themselves. So these steam engines aren't created by a non-user, craftsman engineer guy coming together with a power user and saying, hey, maybe we can do this. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then combining their efforts. It's being done separately. That's a major part of why it's different, how it's going to be different. And we see a little bit of this when Aviendha at the very end goes through the rings and instinctively manages to make them flash forward instead of flash back. And we see a little bit of this kind of early Age of Steam power that she sees a little bit of in her vision. And we actually kind of see trucks, some early 1900s kind of technology.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying it's a little bit weak, because wouldn't we see some sort of, I don't know, reaction from the power community? This is something I'm thinking about. I'm kind of putting, this is like in the moment thoughts, but because I didn't know this is where you wanted to go with this, but I love the Dragon Age series in gaming. And one of the major themes is that mages keep getting put in a hole because of their potential danger, but they keep becoming a potential danger because they keep being put in a hole, right? So which came first? Were they put in a corner and they reacted, or did they do something that caused them to be put in the corner? And when you look at the power that Aes Sedai have, and then now the Black Tower at this point in our conversation has, they're going to react. We're no longer useful. We're no longer respected.
Well, that's why it's a real damn shame that there weren't, obviously that James Regney, Robert Jordan died relatively young, because I would have loved to have seen that Matt story, especially in light of, because what we know about the future really is from those visions that Avienda had when she makes the crystal spire fast forward, show her the future instead of the past. And there is a bit of a conundrum there, because you can see how what happened, but there is a major thing missing, which is how the hell could the Raven Empire manifest itself? You can understand how it could defeat the Aiel, the combined Aiel clans, but how could it defeat the rest of the continent when not only do you have the White Tower, but to your point, you now have the Black Tower as a major effing thing. Now, granted, Avienda's visions are a potential future based on certain actions and decisions being made. But again, what were those actions and decisions, and how did things come about that somehow neutered the White Tower and the Black Tower?
I'm just saying, going forward, to have this industrial revolution, so to speak, it would take a consensus of pulling back from the people who can access the power, or a takeover of those. And with the White Tower and the Black Tower and all the rogue in betweens, it would be another breaking, really, realistically. The best result, and I don't know if this is something that Sanderson missed, or if it wasn't in the notes, or if it's something that Jordan never intended, that the end product of the last battle was no more one power. Because in I say the first reading, but in the reading 1 through 3, 1 through 4,
there,
1 through 5,
completely locked up on my end.
You're locked up on my end. Hold on. Can you still hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Let me try to pause this. All right, are you there? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, so that wasn't supposed to be a red Canada in your message. It's supposed to be a red camera. Though red Canada is fitting, but
that works. I was having issues earlier when I was trying to look stuff up.
What was I in the middle of?
I have no idea. So something about you were saying that you thought the best and most logical outcome for the end was for there to be no more one power.
Yeah, because I even in my first read of all of these, which I think I was in the middle of saying it's 1 through 3, then 1 through 4, then 1 through 5, then 1 through 6. So first read being many rereads, but at the same time going through in progression, was that when we got to the universities, I thought it was going to be a situation where we ended up with no one power. And we ended up in the world we live in kind of now. And so that's where I thought we were going. And I'm wondering if it's a point where Jordan didn't make it clear in the notes, or if Jordan never intended.
I don't think so, because, and we can get into this more when we get to what was his name, the philosopher guy that Rand liked to talk to, Fell.
Yeah.
And had a big
one of my favorite characters ever.
When he's talking about the wheel, and I don't remember.
Well, okay, so not a no more power ever, a power lost.
that I was with you at a certain point in my readings that I thought that the third age was going to end with both sides of the power being lost. But then I realized no, because that would be another calamity, most likely.
Wait,
Or
what? But I think I was thinking the same thing, but I thought it was necessary.
that see, I can see how we have a second golden age here in the fourth age. And I want to say, and I don't remember where this comes from, but I believe we're either told by Jordan or in the books that there are 7 ages in the wheel. And so when it comes back around, yes, at some point, because we are on the wheel, at some point you're going to have an age like ours where there is no power, but that doesn't necessarily have to be this age. And in fact, the more I thought about it, the more I thought that age needs to be the end. I think we're the last age leading
We are.
into yes.
No. I think we're the first age because Merck and Musk and
Could be. And that whatever calamity ends our age somehow leads to the second age, the rediscovery of the power, which leads to the first golden age. I'd always thought that we were the end of the cycle, the lack of one power. We were the end of the cycle, and that the first age was going to be a kind of stone age after we've destroyed ourselves. And the end of that age was the rediscovery of the one power, which leads to the second age, which leads to the golden age.
yeah, no, I always considered us the first age because of and part of it's the references that are supposed to be analogous to things we know. It makes you wonder about the popularity of things at certain times that Ann Landers made the list, but it's
that was amusing. All right. Well, we've gotten to an interesting place based on this, but that's what these 2 chapters are all about, really, in kind of a microcosm, because it's talking about the transitional period between ages. And I think Fell does say, though, he kind of postulates, does every age have to end in a calamity? Do you even know? Are there ages where you don't even know when it has ended and another one begins? Certainly from the Age of Legends to the modern book period, yeah, you knew it. And the last battle, you kind of know that's a climactic ending, but he kind of postulates that maybe they don't all end in calamity.
and it's funny too because it depends on society, right? Because you look at modern society with us, we have BC and AC, right? And well, what if you're Buddhist in China? Is there a before Christ or after Christ? There is no Christ in your religion. So what's the year marker for you, right? And in the Wheel of Time, we've got kind of a homogeneous time frame in this one continent. But what is it for Shara? We never know. We never figure that out. We just know they show up at a very inconvenient time because of Demandred.
Mm-hmm. All right. Did you have any more thoughts on this before we get to Scott's comments on the last episode?
Nope. Go ahead and read them out.
All right. I see. This is where me and you disagree, Scott, because Gawain should have spent another 4 to 5 years with the wise ones instead of running off to rejoin the Aes Sedai. Everything she learns from Aes Sedai is about power and privilege. I already disagree there. With the Aiel, she would have learned about honor and duty. And I definitely disagree there because she did learn about honor and duty. Now, she didn't learn it in the way an Aiel would because she already had preconceived notions. She already had a foundation. That was my point about they were both right and they were both wrong when the wise ones and the Egwene were talking to each other, and she was trying to get them to teach her, is that yes, she doesn't know your way of teaching, that she's going to have a rude awakening when she becomes an apprentice. And from her point of view, no, you haven't done this. You've done this thing, which has strengthened you. So you're not coming at it from nothing, but you're not actually ready. You're just partially ready for what's going to happen to you here. And we'll get into this more because I really like the scene where she leaves the Aiel in the next book and what she does there. So we'll get into it more there. But no, she did learn duty and honor from the Aiel, and she demonstrated it. So I think that's a fallacy. Now, she could have learned more, but I think it seems to me what you're saying is that you wanted her to become an Aiel wise one, and that was never going to happen.
Okay, so this is two-part. The answer is, the first part is, yes, she would have been a more developed human being had she stayed. Because so that's a non sequitur, because two, we have a story that's going on. We have real life that's going on, right? Mm-hmm. So I would have been more educated on psychology or research and development had I stayed for a postdoc. But I also had a family and kids I needed to feed. And so I started to work instead, right?
So you would have known less about those things.
Yeah. So, or less would have been done in that arena. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the story versus what she could have been, you're absolutely right. She would have been a better human being had she stuck around. But the world was going.
Yeah, all of our six main protagonists, the three boys and the three girls, are all young. All of them, they don't have time to learn more because they have to do now.
Perrin would have been a shit ton better blacksmith had he stayed in the Two Rivers, right? Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. Now, the things we don't like about Egwene, me and you, Scott, resulted from that. Yeah, obviously. But at the same time, you can take an understanding of why someone did something and why it was important at the time, still not liking the result.
Well, the first part of your comment there, though, is actually where I think we may disagree even more than that second part about not learning duty and honor. Is yes, she learned power and privilege, but that's not all she learned, and she didn't embrace that because her study, her route to becoming Aes Sedai was interrupted. And I think there's an interesting contrast between the three girls here, because she sits in the middle in the same way Rand sits in the middle of the three boys. That Elaine learned power and privilege in the White Tower, along with other things, because that's who the Aes Sedai are. That whether they intend to teach that to you or not,
learned power and privilege from birth.
Exactly. So her understanding of power and privilege was too far to one side and was too positive, if I can put it that way. She embraced power and privilege because she's a freaking princess, right? But on the other side, you have Nynaeve, who was far too negative to the point of so biased that it hurt her, and it made her have to struggle more to be able to use the incredible power that she has, that she eventually does amazing things with, to help individuals and to help the cause as a whole. So she's too far the other way. Egwene sits in the middle because she didn't grow up with the power and privilege that Elaine has, but she's young enough and she hasn't had the experiences that Nynaeve has, so she doesn't have the strong internal biases that have to be overcome that she has. So yes, she was learning power and privilege, but she was young enough, but still enough of her own person that she wasn't corrupted by it.
Well, I want to just talk against what you just said, but there's another part of me that I started a thread many episodes ago that Egwene and Rand are parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to go that direction. She is parallel to Rand in exactly what you just said, that she's the in-between, but also she's a person who has rapidly and traumatically come to power. I don't think Jordan wrote her as well as he did Rand. And maybe that's a male-female thing. Maybe that's just a byproduct of the situations. But she went into an extremely political domain. What is the Aes Sedai? Whereas Rand was very more overtly power-oriented. And I just don't think it was done as well. And so it makes her more annoying in a way, because it's just strong girl dynamics kind of stuff at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And you're right in some of the development, but at the same time, it wasn't done as well. And I think that's where some of the hate comes from, because Nynaeve was done well. Nynaeve was done very well.
I can see that, because I do think that the political part of her character that comes later is a little too much too soon, because the best parts of her character to me are who she is as a person and how she gets there. Because the best parts of her story to me are when she's with the Aiel, and everything she has to do and learn there. And then when she's captured in the White Tower, many books from now, major spoiler. And she has to figure out how to stand up without being too overt, and everything she does there. To me, that section of Egwene's story is one of the better parts. It's on par, almost, not quite, but almost to me as good as Perrin's story in this book.
I'll agree with you there. I think this is where a limitation came in, was the timeline. Mm-hmm. Because some of the things that make her supposedly great in the end are things that need to be developed over time. And if we had maybe 3 or 4 more years of time go by in this whole situation, it would have been a little bit better.
Uh-huh.
Or more believable, I should say.
This is, I recently rewatched one of the few really good Vietnam War movies, Hamburger Hill. And so I think there's an interesting analogy here, and we've talked about this and Jordan's service in Vietnam. And I think he tries to show this later when Egwene becomes Amaryllis, that she's not a Mary Sue. She doesn't know everything. She can't do everything. So she is relying on others. He just doesn't show it enough. And I don't think he shows it well enough, because there's when you come out as a second lieutenant, and there are lots of stories of this, especially these young guys who haven't been through a ton of training and have no actual combat experience, and then they're thrown into combat. And this is actually done pretty well in the movie Hamburger Hill, of this lieutenant doesn't know anything, quite literally. So he has to lean on his platoon sergeant, who is doing like his second this is like his second tour. Okay. So he knows things, but ultimately the lieutenant still has to be the leader. He still has to show that he's the guy in charge. But then we see that he's leaning heavily on this platoon commander until near the end of the movie, after this ridiculous long battle has gone on. He starts to come into his own. And I don't think that transitional period was done especially well by Jordan. I think that's the dynamic he was trying to write, with Egwene leaning on Siwan and leaning on Elaine and Nynaeve to to help
Well,
teach her and to help
he
her
had he
enact
had
her
a he had
plans.
another variable in there though. She was leaning on Sheriam, and Sheriam was
That's a good point.
a dark friend. So spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Uh, so it actually added an element to that.
But I do think one of the I just don't think it's enough of a weakness that it ruins the story. But I will say one of the weaknesses of her whole arc is that early on, she already seems like she knows exactly what to do. And she's just using these confidants of Elaine and Nynaeve and Siwan and Leanne to help her do it. And we don't see enough of them helping her figure out what to do in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. Well, shit. I think I have a meme for this, but I don't know if I want to break it out yet because it spoils stuff for later episodes, later parts of the book. But it was hold on, let me bring it up. It's it's about Egwene and how things end up turning out in the end.
Moiraine is also worried about Lanfear possibly influencing Rand's actions. She knows a little more about Lanfear than we, the readers, do. That's true. We saw all the way back in the Great Hunt that she was researching it. I don't know that that's specifically what she was worried about here in these opening chapters of Rand's storyline, so much as either going mad or being influenced by the dark in general. Because he didn't tell her about it. Oh, 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 yeah. You guys survived? Oh,
Well, because
oh,
paralleled Rand
yeah,
and Egwene, and she does pretty much a similar thing in the end, but ends up dying.
yeah.
And Rand
Yeah.
does a similar thing in the end and ends up with a nice shiny new body.
Yeah.
That pretty much looks like him, anyways.
Except with dark hair instead of red hair. But anyway,
Yep. So he fits in better. So he's got a nice shiny new body that fits in.
That's always in the back of Moraine's mind, and especially so now after what we've just gotten to, when she's going to go through the rings and she's going to see possible futures, one of which I believe yes, because she says this in her letter, that one of those possible futures she's going to see is Rand going off with Moiraine and coming back and being her pet, basically. So
Lanfear,
yeah. So for sure, later on, that's going to be primary in her thoughts. But I think that's just an element right now before she goes to the rings.
Well, and it's a good point, because you said the rings were possible futures.
Yeah.
And we've had many times, one of our themes of this whole reread is the difference between fate and choice. And if it's a possible future, that means there's a lot of choices that could happen in between, versus everything is just fated.
Yep. I like this point. This is a really good point, and I think it's reinforced by this chapter here, when they first get to Rhuidean, and Avienda is being sent off, and one of them, I don't remember which one, I think it's Bayer, looks at Moiraine and says, you thought you would take her to your tower. And Moiraine says she needs to be trained properly. So very Aes Sedai. That she is wholly focused on her area of the world. Nothing else matters. Moiraine urges the war with Ilian route, but fails to realize that Rand is focused on a different goal. In general, he's just that is a failing of hers in general. That because he is who he is, Rand is kind of the only one wholly focused on the goal. Everyone else that is part of who they are and what they do. He's suddenly discovered that there's an entire nation of warriors that he can possibly get to support him without conquering them, something he desperately wants. That's faux show. Support that comes with no strings and schemers. Well, support that he might think comes with no strings and schemers, and then he meets the wise ones and the clan chiefs and realizes that people are people. But that is a really good point, that all he has to do is go to the Aiel, convince them that he is the person of their prophecies, and they will follow him. Moiraine can't see that and see all the benefits of that, because all that matters to her is the White Tower and the nations of this land, which the White Tower influences. In fact, when he reveals his plan, she thinks that's insane, because the memories of the Aiel War are still too fresh. And if you lead the Aiel over here, everyone's going to turn against you.
Well, and she's also got a little bit of a bias of being the family that cut down the tree.
Yes.
Oh, I have our meme. All right. It was, excellent. Yes. Oh, gosh. Okay, so keep going with the comments.
All right. So he liked our chronological better because he thought, in my opinion, your reactions based on chronology were more on point than this thematic treatment. I can kind of see that. Moiraine completely changes her attitude after her trip to the ter'angreal in Rhuidean. Yes, but she can't change who she is, and she can't change the many decades of thought and habit that have been ingrained into her. And I do think that's an important and interesting development for her as a character, is that you see her attitude has radically changed, but oh, hey, Carheenan should know better indeed. But it's not some kind of switch being flipped, which is another, to his credit, that when characters change, that they aren't just switches being flipped. Jordan writes out a process that leads to, you were here and now you're here. Moiraine knows what the family name Bashir implies, and like I said, Fail mentions it. She says, my birth name is Zareen Bashir. She gives her family name. Obviously, a farm boy wouldn't know, but I just don't see any way Moiraine doesn't very quickly find that out. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, yeah. You didn't need to point this out, Scott. We know, but point of clarification: there is no ter'angreal for traveling. Not one time in the series does a character travel without using the one power. And in fact, here in a couple of books, we're going to get a ter'angreal used for traveling, and it's called an idiot box by Samael, because he's messing with the Shido, and he's actually the one. Anyway, we'll get to that. But yes, God, I hadn't even made that connection. Idiot box. So, I hate this stupid TV series. Judkins had over 4 million words of background, and still he decided to invent crap to suit an agenda. 4 million words. And it's worse than that now that I think about it, because no, he used the idiot box and made it a real thing because he's an idiot. God. I was doing a...
Why do you got to do it? Why do you got to do this to us?
Why you got to do us like that?
Oh, that hurts. It hurts. No, so
go ahead.
If you didn't watch the part 1 of this episode, I brought up Macy Gray. And this is why I hate to bust the balls of the people involved, because there's a force behind this that is extremely powerful. And so you have somebody who was on just a regular old interview show, and she made her thoughts clear that men shouldn't compete against women in sports. And you're not a woman if you just went through this little surgery. And it was pretty basically biologically sound statements with no animus behind it. And 3 days later, she's coming out with apology statements that are like, now that I know X, Y, Z, da da da.
Reading from the prepared statement for the hostage.
Exactly. With basically, it sounds like these interviews you hear from somebody that has a gun to their head.
It's the end
because
of
they're a
1984.
hostage. Yeah. And when I look at, we brought this up with, or I brought this up with the person who cast Wheel of Time. She obviously knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
But she did a shit job with the next show.
Or was she given shit criteria?
Or was she given shit parameters? Yeah. And that's the thing. There's a machine that exists beyond the people involved in it. Now, will I say they're cowards for not standing up to the machine? Yeah, I will say that. Because if enough of them stand up to the machine will cease to exist. But at the same time, it exists. And if I am someone like Clint Eastwood can afford to resist the machine. Bill Maher can resist the machine. Joe Rogan can resist the machine. But I can't even name her name. That's how illegitimate she is. This person who cast the Wheel of Time resist the machine? Probably not at this point. And we have to figure out a way to protect these people from the machine in order for it to change. And I don't know how to do that. I'm a regular person. Maybe someone like Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic who worked in Hollywood could figure it out a little bit better. And I would like to see them come up with some solutions instead of just complain about it. But
the only thing I could think to say is the same basic advice that I've said that I give to people when they ask me about diet. Don't eat the junk that you know is junk. So I enjoy watching people crap on the things I don't like. It gives me a kind of cathartic relief. I have watched far more minutes of people talking about how the Rise of Skywalker, the last sequel movie, how terrible it was. I have yet to watch a single minute of the actual film. Because after The Last Jedi, I said, I'm done. No moss. I watched, some of the Disney Plus stuff. And then I got to a point where I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm not watching anymore. I'll watch people talk about them, especially if they're clever and they make me chuckle and they crap on this thing that I think is toxic, to use the word appropriately. But stop consuming product if it's junk food and you know it's junk food, and it's not going to get any better unless you cut it off. To that point, I'll try and make this quick, but I wanted to gush about Top Gun because I finally went and saw it yesterday. And I can see why every single person I trust and respect on YouTube and podcasts has been saying, go see this movie, because it is just structurally, technically, from a creative point of view, it's a great movie. But then also, he may be a Scientology lunatic, but credit where it's due. Kudos to Tom Cruise for putting his foot down and saying, I don't care that China is throwing a fit. We're not taking the Japanese and Taiwanese flag off of my jacket. Because that actually is a thing. The jacket he wears is the jacket he wore in the first movie. And I'm drawing a blank on what it's from, but it's from it is an actual patch of a multinational uh, uh, exercise that was done with Pacific nations that included Japan and Taiwan as this group that they're a part of, like US, Taiwan, Japan, and I can't remember the fourth flag there. But kudos to them for standing up to these totalitarian bullies and their wimps in the West, in Hollywood and in the US, and saying, no, we're not taking that off. And look what they've done. This is, what is this, the fourth or fifth week that it's been out, or has it been 6 now? It's been out for a while, and the theater I went to wasn't sold out, but it was damn near. So stand up for what you believe in, stand up for what is objectively discernibly right, and then you, the little guy, us, the normal guy, actually support it.
Well, I guess we're benefiting from Xenu fighting China authoritarianism. Because Tom Cruise won't back down because he's a Scientologist. But pick your poison, I guess. But no, he's completely not woke, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
For reasons that I probably wouldn't agree with, but at the same time,
the movie was unapologetically American in the generic sense, mm-hmm. and masculine in the true sense. That's part of why it is so good. Because it takes those general principles, portrays them well, and isn't embarrassed by them. I mean, that's another point. You know, we talked about that dynamic there with, from Egwene's point of view, looking at Lan and Rand saying, you know, it worked, that's what matters. And Jordan is portraying the masculine and the feminine, and he's doing it well, and he's utterly unashamed of it. He is not embarrassed to show both the positive and the negative and say, oh, well, you know, in our modern sensibilities, some people don't like that. Screw that. This is what is, and it's great storytelling.
Well, I brought that up with, I invoked Clint Eastwood, and he doesn't have to be apologetic or all of these things because he is who he is. Tom Cruise is the same way. Mm-hmm. We all know he's a crackpot Scientologist, but he still makes great fucking movies.
He's one of the few bankable movie stars left.
Mm-hmm. And it's really unfortunate from a personal level, but from an entertainment level, you can lose yourself in the entertainment, which is part of the point of entertainment, is to be able to lose, to detach a little bit from real life. And mm-hmm. I guess that's our biggest lament with Wheel of Time, is they push their political agenda via the series, while we were enjoying this awesome thing right here.
Yeah. And then we sat down to have an hour-ish of escapism from craptacular real life, and instead we get, why the hell is the women's circle shoving Egwene down a waterfall? And that's like one of our openings. That's our introduction to Emmons Field, and it's like, what the hell is happening?
What was this?
Oh. I still don't understand. I still don't understand the logic of that. But
they never even finished that thought.
No, it
just happened.
Yeah. It's like, what? Huh? You know, Scott's point, 4 million plus words of background, and you just make weird random crap up. Mm-hmm. Why?
Which, you know, it's unfortunate because we're judging the series. And back to our point about Clifton Duncan and judging actors and actresses, Egwene, the actress, hasn't been bad. She really hasn't been horrible at all. But at the same time, I'm so hateful of the character they made her.
Yes. Well, hell, one of our biggest complaints has been Perrin, and frankly, he hasn't been bad. If who Perrin is supposed to be is what's his face from Mice and Men. I'm brain farting on the name. What's the character's name? I played the clip from the movie with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich and Lenny.
Yep.
Yeah. So if that's who Perrin was supposed to be, well, kudos. Give the guy an Emmy. The reason we hate the portrayal is because that's not who Perrin is.
I would like to see a challenge to his acting, but thus far he's my least favorite of all the characters. I would love to say Matt, but they already replaced him, so I can't say what the new actor is going to be. So.
Those were done poorly, but Perrin was incredibly one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was just like you said, Lenny from of Mice and Men. He looked like he was. I'm going to use language that might get us canceled here. He looked like he was the retard that could break somebody's neck at any moment. Is what they made him look like, and that's unfortunate because as we've gone through these books, Perrin is such a deep thinker.
Yeah,
and I'm trying to think of a historically cinematic version of that. Maybe we need to think of that for the next time. What would have been a good Perrin?
Let's put our gray cells to that and see if we can come up with something to talk about. We've mentioned it before, but we really haven't gone in depth. We should do a little bit more of our own casting of not just, this actor because they look like the character, but this portrayal is really on point with who this character is supposed to be.
Brad Pitt from Seven. He was a deep thinker that just overthought everything. That's kind of a Perrin mentality. If I just think of something off the top of my head. Remember that movie?
But still acted and reacted. He wasn't the plotting analyst that Morgan Freeman's character was.
True.
So on the surface, he might seem like he's not this deep thinker, but then when he gets going, then in his interactions with Morgan Freeman, then you see, no, wait, this guy is actually deep. On the Brad Pitt character in the movie, it's the first kind of surface level is because he seems like this kind of, bro from the block who just became a cop. And then you realize, oh no, he's actually a good cop. He's actually a good detective. The more he talks and the more you see his thinking, and with Perrin, it's at first glance, he's this big monster. He's this big, muscle bound oaf. And then you realize, oh no, he's actually a thinker.
Mm-hmm. So and then you see when he gets the surprise scene, not to ruin the movie for anybody, you see his rage.
30-year-old movie. Yeah.
30-year-old. Yeah. If we're giving spoilers on a movie that old, get out more, I guess.
Well, I think we should wrap this up. And as Scott commented last time, I was hopeful that this episode would get to the steak and potatoes of this section instead of just the juices. And hopefully we gave you plenty of meat here. I will say that this is a really good point he makes, but I want to put a pin in it and talk about it more when we actually get closer to it, which is that Gawain and Egwene deserve each other almost like each is the other's curse. I think that is a good point. And as I kind of mentioned last time,
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Yeah, that is one of the failings of Egwene's story arc, is her relationship with Gawain, I think, is the weakest relationship. It's not like Jordan doesn't know how to write good relationships, because Rand has lots of relationships. Perrin and Fael, of course, Nynaeve and Lan. You have some great, well-written relationships within the books amongst these characters, and Gawain and Egwene does seem like an afterthought, and it's not done especially well. So I will certainly agree to that. But we can delve more into that as we get to it.
Well, I'd also like to point out that it's no surprise that the people that hate on Godwin also hate on Egwene.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it is accurate to point out that they are there are a lot, I won't say very similar. There are a lot of similarities there between aspects of their character.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I feel like we made it a good bit. We got through 4 chapters of very heavy stuff. And I think we kind of focused on what to me are the biggest points of these chapters, but you know, we know Scott's not the only one watching these stupid videos. You other people comment too if you have thoughts, comments, questions, so that we can respond as well. You got anything else?
No, I agree with you. We do enjoy addressing the comments. We enjoy getting through these books. We enjoy the other part of it when shit, we got 4 hours of stuff today, which the hot part of the day is done. So I guess I got to go work outside. But
crap,
damn it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the next part's going to be pretty quick because we set the stage for so much else.
Yeah.
And I think we've been talking about it even in the other arcs, but in book 5, I think we'll go chronologically again.
Mm-hmm.
It did seem to go a little bit smoother. That's why I made the question.
Yeah.
For last time. So thanks, Scott, for getting back to us, and we'll get back to that. But we have to finish the way we started this time. And I don't think we gave any advice, any medical advice, any election fornication advice.
So stupid that we have to say that after everything we do. Talking about a freaking book here, you a-holes.
Yeah. And I've learned some stuff about how to label things on YouTube to get more views. So hopefully I'm going to try it this time around.
All right.
If anybody else has any ideas, please share us because we suck at advertising. And
I need to work on that.
Yeah, we all need to work on that, but you could help us as well. And Shire Distilling for great whiskey. If you want to pay me, please pay me. Because this was 4 hours out of my afternoon. But
yeah.
If anybody accuses us of grifting, we've got 92 episodes now of.
Oh, we will grift. Let us. We are not. Accuse us all you want, because if we were able to, we would do it.
We would do it, but we've got 92 episodes of at least 2 to 3 hours of work each time to say we have done this for free. We love you guys. Love you, Heath. And we'll see you. I don't know when we're going to record again, but it'll be soon.
Yeah. We'll get back to it soon. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, next time.